Okay. Hey, everybody. We are Super Monkey Fighters, and we're back with our movie podcast called What Would You Change? This week we watched Gran Torino. Before I get into that, I'm here with PaPaNuggett and Monkey Feathers as well. Always forget to intro my fellow guests.
We're done.
Because we don't
Important.
know. Like, meh.
You're not as important as Clint Eastwood, let's be honest.
Well, you should introduce Clint Eastwood then.
Yes. So now, Gran Torino, of course, is a film directed, produced, and starring Clint Eastwood. Came out in 2008 in a limited release, so most people would have seen it in 2009. One of those that snuck in there for the award season, so it could get in there. It's a story about a crotchety old man. Yeah. Who he kind of befriends his neighbors who are Hmong Americans, and goes from there. So it's an interesting film. I've seen it before. I know PaPaNuggett you have as well. I don't know, Monkey Feathers, was this the first time you've seen it?
I had not seen it until last night watching it for this podcast.
Yeah, I liked it. What did you guys think?
For me personally, I'm starting to notice, I haven't seen many Clint Eastwood movies, but he's, in my opinion, starting to look very typecast in his movies, where he's an angry man, an angry old man, an angry something, to where I'm not saying it was a bad movie. I'm just saying that I would only watch it once in my personal feel of it, because it didn't really do it didn't do a whole lot for me. It was a good watch, middle of the line type movie for me, unfortunately.
So this is a movie I like, and I think it's mainly because of what I think they're trying to do or trying to say with the movie. And I mean, Clint Eastwood being typecast aside, I think that's a whole other debate within the movie. So really what they're trying to portray is, this guy that is kind of stuck in his ways, which I think they're trying to appeal to. They're not trying to, I think, appeal to people that are like Walt, but people that know people like Walt, that he has the ability, even though he's stuck in his ways, and he has the ability to change, right? So the other point is like the relationship they demonstrate with him and his kids. Like, there really isn't a relationship there. You can see that they're just showing up to just kind of check the boxes, right? They're there because they feel more or less obligated to do something because he is their father, but they don't really want to. They're internally within their own family units fighting about it, and because none of them want to. Yeah. And I think those are things that some people can relate to on some levels.
Well, I think that's one of the big themes is, like you said, you're just checking the boxes, because you got to remember that it opens on a funeral. It's his wife's funeral, but it's his family's mother and grandmother's funeral as well. And that's kind of a theme throughout, where people are just checking the boxes. I mean, later on he goes to confession because it's what his wife asked him to do. And it's because it's what you do. It's one of those things that you check the boxes. And I think there's a lot of people who are doing that same kind of a thing. Like, this event happens, this is the response. Right. Like, this is the ideal response. I think that's kind of the point is that it is that change that, no, this can't keep going this way. And it really is that kind of that shocking moment to kind of bring people out of, no, you need to look at things a little bit differently. And that's how you move forward. So,
yep.
And that's where a lot of the character growth comes in within the main characters. Unfortunately, not necessarily his family, but the priest and the neighbors and him as well. I think that's that's the big realization that he comes to that nobody else does until the very end is he realizes that he can't keep doing what's expected, because that's going to make it just continue down the same path it's always been. So, which is one of those interesting things I did want to bring up with Clint Eastwood playing cliched roles, and typecast and those kinds of things. This is kind of a send off to the Dirty Harry personality that he's always had, as one of the typecast things, kind of in the same sense that Unforgiven was the send off to his cowboy character, which is another one that he directed, and I think he wrote, I'm not sure, but I know he directed and starred in that one as well, where it's an atypical Western. This is an atypical, I guess, angry old man or vigilante justice kind of movie. And so I don't think it feels as good of a send off as Unforgiven was. But this is that kind of him passing that off. And I think that's the big turn at the end, is you're expecting one thing and he does it entirely differently. So starting watching it again, I was honestly kind of disappointed. It didn't hit me the same way at the beginning, but then by the end I was like, oh no, this is actually very cleverly crafted to be that statement on that kind of, if it was Dirty Harry would have gone in the end and just murdered everybody. I mean, that's the end of, Dirty Harry is, do you feel lucky? So, the bad guy gets his comeuppance because the good guy kills him. Yeah, and I guess I didn't really see it that way. Yeah. But I completely see where you're coming from. That hit me just this time around, because when I started watching, I was like, oh man, this is just a cliched Clint Eastwood story again. And it's like, I remember liking it when I saw it in the past, and going through it this time, I was just kind of like, this is just more of the same stuff. And then right there towards the end, as his character is kind of coming to that realization, is kind of when I hit it as well. It was just like, oh, this is, as a film outside of what it is, this is that, I think that's a point that was maybe missed with a lot of people who really liked this movie when it first came out. Was this was the good old boy vigilante justice getting the bad guys in the end. He just did it smarter than the others, and it's really more of a societal change with how things are, just in general, how people interact, and how societies and communities, especially, because that's one thing with the community, is the community was terrorized by a gang, and nobody speaks out against them because they're the same group of people as their community. Right. And then at the end, they all, the community changes to where they open up a little bit more, and they address the problem.
I think one of the reasons why they didn't speak out was more because they didn't want retaliation. Yeah. Because when Clint Eastwood's character goes and beats up one of the gang members, the retaliation was severe. So I think it's more of not necessarily protecting their own, because even at the end of the movie, they don't protect their own. They're like, we want these people gone.
Yeah, so. But there's after the drive-by and all that scene, nobody speaks to the cops. Well, yeah, because there's retaliation. Yeah. They themselves don't want to get shot at or beat up or attacked. And that's where it took him being that hero again to really make the change. Where, I mean, that's the inciting incident where everybody around is like, no, he was kind of the saving factor, which I think these days would be seen as a bigger negative.
Because a white man comes in to save.
It's the white savior, which is it's a very negative cliche that Hollywood perpetuates. I mean, we always joke about The Last of the Mohicans was a white guy, and The Last Samurai was Tom Cruise, and
a white guy.
Even though he wasn't the last samurai, but he was the main character. Rather than focusing this story on the group you're talking about, it's a white guy. The Dances with Wolves is the same kind of a thing. I don't think this one's quite as bad as that, because the reason that the medals put on the kids' and they focus on that at the end, I think, is to showcase that kid and what that kid's going to go on to do is more of the hero of the story. That he's the change in that culture where they set up that, Hmong girls go to college, Hmong men or boys go to jail. Like he's that change, he's that difference. He's the hero, not. I mean, I think Clint even says that at the end. He's like, I'm soiled. You're not. I finish things, and you need to go on and build things. Mm-hmm. So it's. I think it does a little bit better of that, but it's still, I don't think quite hits as home as well as it could.
Well, and I mean, to be honest, like I didn't see the whole white savior thing that didn't really stand out to me. But I see it more as, and it probably is in that same vein that, it is, to me, this movie is all about change and changing your ways. And to me, that's what I saw with, Walt being more accepting to his neighbors and like completely doing a 180, both on how he presents himself and just interacts. And
I think it does a very good job of showcasing how that happens in real life, where it's through interaction and a bit of it's forced. That none of these characters want to necessarily be around each other, but there's situations that force them together, and that's really where they come through with those kinds of things.
Yeah,
so I think it does a really good job of portraying that and showing that's the focus. I mean, if you were to boil it down to one storyline, which it's not, there's really multiple things going on, character developments across the board. So,
yeah, and like you said, I think it brings to light kind of some of the issues that we have today, where you have groups of people that don't like other groups of people. But I think when you get individuals together, that it shows that like you find similarities, even though like you for some reason don't like another stereotype of person. I think if you bring people together and have those interactions, people realize that they're not that much different than others, and they find common ground and commonalities, and begin to question why they didn't or felt the way they did in the first place. And I think that's what it's really portraying.
So then if you guys could boil it down to one thing you liked about this movie, what would it be?
Get off my lawn.
I just say, that's the best scene in the movie. Well, I don't know. One thing I liked about the movie, I don't know if there's really necessarily one thing that stood out among the others as to what I liked. There's a few things I didn't like, a few things I would
change.
But as far as what I liked, I mean, it's Clint Eastwood. I like Clint Eastwood. He has done some bad movies. This one I don't necessarily think ranks among his highest. But I did like, once it actually got into it, I did like to see the interactions between everybody and that change, and how, I mean, he even acknowledges it a couple of times where he's like, I'm not the most pleasant person to be around, but I can see what's going on and those kinds of things. So it just seems like he was very self-aware and willing to make a change. That's one of the things I really liked about it. So,
so the things that I liked, I felt like the story, character development, it wasn't shallow. Like there was a lot of pieces that came together that translate to like history, kind of real things in the world. So they weren't just kind of created in a vacuum.
But there was active construction in 2008 in the movie and not in real life.
Okay. but I think there was a lot put toward making that kind of as a base, and I thought it was done well.
Monkey Feathers, what'd you like?
I mean, I agree with you about the relationship that he started with his neighbors. It turned from a very angry, don't talk to me, don't come near me, into a more as caring as it can be for a Clint Eastwood character,
Well, yeah.
that he essentially started caring for the guy, Tao, I believe that's how his name is said, and his sister, to where when things happen to her, he gets very angry and he wants retaliation. And I imagine that in the beginning of the movie, he just would have walked back into his house and not thought anything of it. But because he grew closer to his neighbors, closer to these two people, he started to care. And that was something that I really liked about it, because it did show change. It did show that even this, I don't know how old he is in the movie, but let's say an 80-year-old man, he's still able to change after so long of being stuck in his ways.
It's the difference between his neighbors and his own family is they kind of push to become part of his life. And it's that assertive confidence that really makes it happen, where his family just brushes him off, and he just brushes his family off as well, because every time he pushes on his family, they just walk away. And that's the tragedy of him and his family, because he in confession, that's one of the things he confesses to, is not having a strong relationship with his sons. And that's one of the things the weak points within that is his family is a cliche. They're caricatures. They don't necessarily, I don't think they act quite as the way real people would in those situations. Or they're more over exaggerated in how those situations are. It just seems like they were over exaggerating to make that point as quick as they could with a lot of things.
Well, yeah,
there were a few, like some of the phone calls and things with his sons were really realistic, but the, hey, go help your grandpa kind of things when they walk up and ask him to help, or, the dad does the same thing. And then the daughter, some of the background characters, one of the moments when he kind of changes his attitude towards the neighbor is when the lady across the street's groceries fall out of her car and the kids walk by and just make fun of her. And then the neighbor goes across the street and helps. That changes his perception of that. That's more realistic in how, I don't know, just that just didn't feel, it felt like what somebody wanted the world to be like rather than what it really is. They would have just walked by and ignored her rather than, done something rude kind of a thing. But I don't know. I don't live in Detroit, so maybe Detroit really is like that. But
so then you'd consider that one of the things that you don't like?
I just in watching it, very recently, his family, especially, I think, as characters, I think intentionally, I don't think this was by accident. I think they intentionally made them just seem, this is where you need to be. You need to be the ungrateful kids.
Or the spoiled selfish, what is it?
Spoiled selfish, yeah.
What's in it for me?
And they played it to, they took it to 11. And it just, I don't know, it felt a little weird to me just watching it recently. I get the point that they're trying to make with it, and I think it's important because his reactions to them, I think, are equally, it's a two-sided street with that one. But that's where it helps him come together with the neighbors and with other people, is that's how he interacts. That's how he understands that you respect him, is standing up for yourself. And so, and that's the interactions he has with his barber, and that's the interactions with the construction manager that he gets the kid a job with. It's not about being crotchety and angry all the time. It's about being confident.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's where he sees that, oh, you're going to stand up for yourself. You've got confidence in yourself. Okay, let's have a conversation. And he sees in his family, just, they give up and they move on.
One thing that, we kind of talked about, I think before we started recording, but it's why did they choose a Gran Torino? Because when I saw that, I'm like, what's a Gran Torino? But as I've sat and kind of thought about it, I think it works because to Walt, that's his prized possession, because he worked in the plant and he knew about it. But to everyone else, it's what's a Gran Torino,
Well, And I mean, it even goes further because he actually built that specific car.
Oh, he put the steering column in it.
He put the steering column in. He was part of building it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it means something to him. And I think that's where, I mean, especially him and his granddaughter. That's, you know, his granddaughter just thinks, oh, I'm going to get this because that's how it is.
That's how it is,
right?
yeah.
It's another one of those things where it's like, oh, this is just how it is. This is how life goes. He makes a point. I mean, that's how him and Thao, you know, Thao tries to steal it. Mm-hmm. And that's what forces them together, is that whole situation. And so I think it's kind of refreshing to see that a little bit. Like, I mean, and I think that's the point of the family, is it's the spoiled little brats get their comeuppance kind of a thing. Because it is one of the things that actually frustrated me watching it was Thao, the first half of the movie, everybody just kind of shits on him. Mm-hmm. Like he's lazy and stupid and he's not a man and blah, 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 blah. But he's always working. Mm-hmm. Like, he's never not doing something. And I think they kind of gloss over it a little bit, or they don't necessarily make a huge point of it. But what Walt, it's Clint Eastwood's character, what he teaches him is confidence. He doesn't teach him how to work. Mm-hmm. Like, he's not showing him how to use any of the tools or how to fix anything. He just says, go and fix that thing. Like, and they do it, right? It's more about him building the confidence to show that he really does know how to do those kinds of things. And it's frustrating to me because I see that a lot with the generational argument, you know, the okay boomer and millennial fight. Mm-hmm. As ridiculous as that is, I know so many parents who've told their kids that they're lazy, but their kids who are in their 20s and have a young family who are working 3 jobs to get by. Like that's not lazy. That's, you know, and I see that a lot. And so that was kind of frustrating to see that
portrayed,
but I like, they did address it, right? But they just didn't make it. It wasn't the major point of the movie, but just the first half of the movie is like this kid's always working. He's gardening. He's doing the dishes. He's, you know, he's constantly doing things, and he's just getting shit on the whole time. And so, well, and I guess that's the point is that he's supposed to build confidence and stand up for himself. And
to be fair,
that's his character.
I mean, Walt he did go over some stuff and kind of help him out and there, but to the same point, you're right. It's not that Thao was just lazy, not doing anything. Yeah.
Well, that's why he identifies with Sue, Tao's sister. Mm-hmm. First is because she naturally has confidence,
right,
and is maybe a little overconfident, going to get herself in trouble, and so. But that's how those two make a connection. Is that, and that's how I think a lot of people make connections. Is she sees everything as something to joke about and throw back in his face, kind of a thing. So rather than be offended and or sheepish or just let him walk over, you know, and say whatever he's going to say. Like, she pushes back.
Well, she has the confidence and
she has the confidence, and Thao doesn't.
Right.
And so it's an interesting take, because it's one of those things that you think in life, if you were to apply it to your real life, like, you know, how many situations are there that are more like this than, you know, like families that don't interact together because whatever reason somebody's not making the effort, but they make an effort with a neighbor rather than, or a friend, or those kinds of things. So
then what would you change? Or how would you change?
I would have cut a half an hour out of the first of the movie. It takes a long time of just showing Walt as a crotchety, angry old man before it actually gets into any character development.
But that's the money. that's the money of the movie.
Yeah. It seems like they kind of make the same points over and over again. Like when he ends up going to the doctor, and the nurse calls his name and doesn't pronounce it right. And it's like, you know, do we really need to see that he thinks the world is bad and changed and he doesn't fit in and doesn't like the fact that, you know, all of these things are there? Like, it's another one of those things, right? Like, yeah, we need to establish it, but we don't need to keep hammering it in our face.
I don't know, Monkey Feathers, what's your opinion on that? Because Loki's seen it before, but from your fresh take, seeing it the first time, do you feel like it was too much? Because I feel like they're trying to really drive that point home. And if you've seen the movie, then you kind of already know it's coming. And I think a sensation
maybe that
it could be that it seems too long because you already kind of know. You're like, yeah, we get the point. But from a fresh take, I'm wondering if you felt the same way.
It really drives home the fact that he's basically racist. I don't know if it's ever been officially called out, but he's saying a lot of racist things.
Oh yeah,
And so because you were talking about the scene with I would say she's the nurse who tries to call his name, and she's mispronouncing it. In my mind, I'm just thinking, okay, so does he have a problem with this character now because she's not white, or what? And then when his doctor changed to the female, I believe of Asian descent, if that's the proper way to say it, because I don't know what of descent she is. But he's standing at the back near the door, and he's just very much like, where's my old doctor? Why? Like, what's... And so it didn't come across as change for me. It just came across as him being racist. And so that's more of how that hit me. And so I think that there were some parts that dragged on a little bit, whether or not it was in the beginning or, throughout the movie. Some things I think could have been, trimmed down or cut or not there, I guess. Because one of the things that I didn't like was some of the dialogue and how it was written or how it was said. I know that in reading about the movie, some of it was improvised, or I believe some of the Hmong actors, they had little acting experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so, granted, you're being directed by Clint Eastwood, who has a lot higher standards for things, but just some of the dialogue, it felt very awkward in how it was said or how it was written. And so with a lot of things, because back to PaPaNugget's question, I think that if it was more cohesive with both the actors and the story, I would feel that it probably wasn't as long to build up the grouchy old man. But because you do have, for the first hour or so, building up Clint Eastwood's character to be a grouchy old man, and he's really good, then you throw in these new actors, and it starts to feel out of place. And so if you take Loki's perspective and take the first half hour and remove it, then it might feel a little bit more cohesive and together.
I wouldn't just take the first half hour. I would just trim it down to, get into the actual character developments and the interactions a little bit faster. Because the movie didn't feel like it dragged on to me. I recognized that once it started getting really interesting again, it was about an hour into the movie. So,
right,
just about half the movie. So, and maybe it's just more of you've established the characters. I got it. Let's get going into the story more is kind of how I took it, rather than you've established the characters. Okay, let's not just keep establishing the same thing. Again, like we get it. We understand, or for me at least, I understand this is who they are. Let's see how they interact, rather than this is how they are. Let's keep showing you how they are. But some of it was, like his interactions with the barber before he takes Thao. Like, that's important to establish that relationship beforehand. So that's one of the things that I would keep in there.
Anything else? Any other opinions? PaPaNuggett loves the movie, so I doubt that there's anything that he would change.
Yeah, and even the things that you guys mentioned, like with the lower quality of acting, like all of that awkwardness, like it didn't pull me out of the movie. Like it seemed to work for me.
Well, and it's one of the things, like I would put it as a negative on the film, but I don't know if I would have done it any differently. Like I think,
like it felt,
you come to like a lot of the characters,
kind of raw to a certain point to me, like in a good way.
And even it was only in certain moments, because I didn't have an issue with all the acting, but there were certain moments where it was really awkward writing or just portraying of the dialogue, to where I'm going along, I like it, and then all of a sudden there's an awkward line delivery or awkward writing of a line.
I can think of a couple points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
but it
So
still
it's-
didn't
it's-
bother me that much.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way I took it too, because the ones that bothered me the most were usually kind of the villains in the story, and I think they were trying to downplay them a lot, and so I think it kind of fits that kind of cliched view of things, and so I think that's more of what they were trying to go for is a lot of the cliches, because I really do think that's kind of the point of this, is to hopefully look at some of your assumptions and maybe make a change. I don't know if that's necessarily the point that they were trying to get across with the movie. That's kind of what I took away from it, was that tough guy, macho attitude towards everything. One isn't necessarily a bad thing, but can be, and maybe that, where that leads, because that's really the gang members are all just trying to be macho and save face and those kinds of things, and that's the point that Clint Eastwood tries to get across to everybody else. But in the end, that's not the route that he takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and that's the big change that makes is that. And I think I do really like that turn at the end when, everybody's expecting the big, Clint Eastwood shootout. And I think this has a bigger change at the end. So one other interesting fact is I have Wikipedia up right here. The budget on this was between 25 and 33 million, and it made 270 at the box office. So I think it's in a time period when I think Clint Eastwood could do no wrong, and I think he knew how to make films on a efficient budget that made a lot of money, and so I think he was able to just do whatever he wanted to with things, and I think it's nice to see that sometimes when you hear all the stories of movies getting changed because of how much money's behind them, and then they end up flopping because there was no one driving vision behind it all. So that's been our movie podcast. What would you change? Or I can't remember what we're calling this.
What would you
It'll
change?
just be what would you change?
Yeah.
Probably
Yes.
the name of the podcast would be one thing we'll change. So, none of us can ever seem to remember it. So we are Super Monkey Fighters. I am Loki, again with PaPaNuggett and Monkey Feathers. And that's our show. So leave a comment down below if you liked this video, if you liked the movie, what you thought of it. Share your opinions down there, and we'll see you next time. Remember, you are awesome.